Okay, I'll link this thread below, but Star Storyteller did bring up a good point. Could I go into more detail about what I mean by like soap opera? And this is in regards to basically a setup that happened on Twitter where it's like this one lady was like, "Oh, all the guys should list the last 5 female writers they've like read or something," and it kind of like it spiraled out from there. Where it is true though. When men and women read things, they key in on vastly different stuff usually. The guys will usually enjoy a little bit more of the nuts and bolts. They want more action. They want more kind of chivalry. Where the guy is, a more traditionally masculine, avatar. Ready and raring to go for adventure, and even stuff like very noteworthy stuff like the Black Company is very masculine in nature. If you want something that caters to men nearly completely, yeah, the Black Company will do it. Now, some stuff can overlap. Some women can enjoy aspects from masculine fiction. I know I do, because majority of the time, the guys will get to the point generally, at least for books that I'm targeting right now, and they'll have a mixture of, the plot going forward, maybe some of the side elements developing, like the other parts of the world or the setting. But they'll always make sure that all those elements, will propel things forward and not like meander as much. Now there are exceptions, kind of like Wheel of Time, where it's just like there's a reason why many call it the slog, and in certain points even more so than others. But I'm personally just trying to get away from books that just meander like that. Now, there are big behemoths that don't meander. They have literally that much, plot threads to tie together, which, that's what that Malazan Book of the Fallen stuff is. It's like, it's massive because it has so much stuff to, like, convey to the reader and everything. But if I had to choose between the two, Black Company, gets the ball rolling, and it just keeps going and going and going. Now, granted, nowadays I'm not reading much stuff in that vein, mainly because I'm writing my own uplifting science fiction stuff, and I'm also looking for stuff along similar avenues. But to get back to the crux of the question, what do I consider soap opera? Well, a primary example would be the Anita Blake series, which they started off as popcorn level fun. Again, it doesn't have to be Shakespeare or some high level of entertainment. It can be just simple mysteries tied together that flesh out a world and keep the plot moving forward. And she did have some, soap opera elements where it's like, oh, which of these men will she choose? Da 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 da. But it wasn't the major focus of Anita Blake initially. It was just her solving mysteries with her boss and his corporation, and working with the police to discover like which kind of monster killed this person and how did that tie into the overall bigger part of the plot. But eventually that plot became non-existent and just became a complete one for one, like 95% of it is smut and Anita going through various relationships of tug of war, because the whole will they won't they thing. If you think of the old soap operas on TV from the 70s to like 90s, like the Days of Our Lives thing, like me and my cousins used to crack up at that, like, oh, how many weeks has Marlena been possessed by the devil now, and when is John gonna rescue her? It's like, it's an endless soap opera for a lot of female oriented books, to where the main draw is the constant flux of the relationships and how the main female protagonist will react to them. And like, oh, which of these buff crazy men will she choose? Or will she bypass them for the childhood best friend or something? And usually it's never the childhood best friend. The one that's the most stable of all of them, they have to go for the dark, gritty, and brooding, what they consider alpha male. But really, when I look at it, it's just like dang, man, that's not going to be a very stable relationship. But that's not the whole point of the soap opera aspect. they want that constant, set up to where it's like this relationship will not be stable, you know, or you'll get to it to where at the very end she'll finally choose someone or something. It's the reason why I don't get into majority romances, because that's their main draw for most women that read them. It's like the constant, oh, who will she pick? The whole world's her oyster for different kinds of men and everything, or what have you, whatever persuasion you happen to be. But that seems to be the clear theme with most soap operas. The status quo doesn't really change, like in terms of the person settles down and actually starts a life. It's the constant, well, let's throw another monkey wrench into the works. Well, let's throw another monkey wrench into the works. Oh, let's throw another one in there. And pretty soon you end up with a harem like Anita Blake has, where, oh, she doesn't have to choose. She has all the colors of all the different kinds of ice cream. And it's just like, oh god. It's the reason why I gravitate more towards, chivalry kind of romance, where it's that you have a character that's already set up to be with someone, and just get on with it. That's the reason why I still read the Alien series by Jeannie Coach, because she had her character choose very early, and then plot developments happened around that relationship, but it wasn't the main draw of that series for me. The main draw was just seeing how every book, how she would expand on her setup of Area 51, and eventually she got to the point where she's doing multiversal stuff, and everybody's going out into space and exploring things and everything. So it has elements that I did very much enjoy. Boy. And even though I do still mention it a lot, Babylon 5 did balance overall, hey, here's the plot, here's the different arcs, and yes, there was some romantic elements, but it wasn't the primary focus. So when it did pop up, it felt like it was a little bit more organic and the characters grew into it. A lot of the soap opera books, it's just, it's static in the way that the character will not choose between the harem of beefy men. It's like tugging at people like, oh, you prefer this couple? Well, it's not going to happen. Oh, you prefer that couple? Well, it's not going to happen. We have to make sure the central character will never get to the point where they will ultimately have to choose. That and most women-centric romance stuff, they might label it romance, but it's really erotica. And it's just like, I'm not here to read about poorly written IKEA erotica. I know I don't have the chops to write such an intimate scene, so that's why, guess what? I fade to black. Oh my. Again, I can count on one hand maybe 3 or 4 writers that do it well enough to where it doesn't, derail things. But a lot of soap opera aspects, that's the primary thing in the arena. The constant shuffling of relationships, whether it's going to be friendship or tension, usually sexual tension between the main character and her multitude of beaux to choose from. And it's just, it doesn't really appeal to me. I've always enjoyed stuff where, again, the character knows who they're going to go for, or it's pretty blatant who the main interest will be, but it's not the primary carrier of the story arc. It's there, but the primary story arc is usually defeating, the great evil and whatnot. And yes, I do like simple stories like that. But it's just most of the acquisitions editors for a lot of books, it's 80 to 85% female, and majority of them prioritize, and this is mostly in traditional publishing nowadays. Baen's the one exception, where you can find books that are genuinely, curated to interest guys specifically in traditional publishing land. Now, a few of them from Daw and others can cross the lines and cater to both. a recent example is also Sun Eater. It does have some dynamic relationship elements, but it's in the background compared to the foreground. The foreground is just exploring this world and seeing what kind of messes Hadrian gets into. And I know a lot of people still compare it to Dune. It shares some peripheral stuff with Dune, kind of like how he starts out being part of a royal family and all, but he doesn't have anywhere close to the same relationship Paul had with his father and mother. In fact, Hadrian's parents, having Hadrian and Crispin and everything, was pretty much like a business transaction. They're pretty much married in name only for like political alliance purposes. And yeah, there wasn't much love there. I can guarantee you that. And when it came to the character's development, the only one that showed up by his bedside when he got hurt was the scholiast, Gibson. And everything else spirals out from there. But it does share some makeup. Like a lot of series and adventure stories out there will share a lot of makeup out there where the building blocks to get people invested. It's pretty secular. Again, that's why you don't have to worry about being super original, like I always say. But yeah, soap operas amused me when I was younger because I'm like, it was relationship issues dialed up to infinity and beyond, but they usually never really completely resolve themselves. It was just an endless door of what else is going to happen to this couple, and we're going to do it in the most outrageous way possible. Like again, with Days of Our Lives, Stefano or something constantly messing up people. You have the hidden exes that throw a monkey wrench into things to where it's like, oh no, I've fallen in love with my ex again. You'll notice that Uplift Protocol really doesn't have that problem. When I set out to make the characters for Uplift Protocol, I wanted them to have already a few key elements set up in their arc. So that way I would avoid some of the soap opera elements that I don't wish to insert into my own stuff. That, and yes, usually the soap opera elements will take precedence, and then the plot will move at a standstill, basically. It won't move forward at all. And sometimes you'll get endless amount of books, like 3 or 4 books of just the characters waffling about, even more mopey than Hamlet, about their relationship life. Oh my. Now, to have a male example of somebody that does end up kind of getting buried under details rather than moving the plot, again, Mr. Weber does love to tell people how all of his miraculous tech works and how the missiles go pew pew. But sometimes after pages and pages of that, you're like, okay, where's the character moments in the plot thread again? There it is. Because there have been times with Mr. Weber's books where I've skimmed stuff until it gets back to the plot again. So it's always important to make sure your plot stays steadily moving. And if that means you have a shorter book, then that's what it means. If you want to make sure it's longer and everything, then group it together in like a set of 2 or 3. Like, you can make stuff into a duology and then multiple sets if you want. It's just entirely up to the writer. I guess my biggest thing with the soap opera elements, it doesn't feel like there's any forward progression once they rear their head within the narrative. Okay, since the part 1 ended a little bit abruptly because my system decided to be like, woohoo! Another aspect for soap opera stuff usually revolves around, bedroom antics. Like, that's the primary draw of a lot of these soap operas, a lot of the eroticas and everything else. People want to see what's going on in all the pillow talk that happens between characters. Personally, I have a little bit of that in there, but not like the erotica part. More like you'll get to see, Thomas and Gino in bed every once in a while, but they're not doing anything outrageous. They're just talking to themselves about like certain things that have happened. But sometimes I show them in that light because it shows how comfortable they are with each other and how healthy their marriage is. Like, they could talk about literally anything, at a moment's notice, at a drop of a hat. And besides, come on, people, we already know what happens between couples once the door closes and they're safely away from prying eyes. And in most traditional couples, you can see that result because, like, oh, hey, look, some babies popped up. Oh, look at that. There you go. You can kind of put two to two together. And yes, I do often make a little jokes here and there about, a lot of stuff, like, just like with me, a lot of initial kind of more raunchy stuff will fly over my head because my mind really isn't in that particular mindset. It takes me a while to pick up on some of the more risque kind of humor that some people display, so I put that into Eliza as well. Again, I put part of myself into all these characters and also other aspects that I've observed. But again, a lot of like soap opera stuff, it primarily feeds into all the things I'm just not desiring right now. Like, when I was much younger and a lot more like hormones raging, okay, sure, it was funny to read some of these things and be like, oh my god, it went like R-rated or something. Because even when I was a kid, like in my teens, like late high school and everything, my parents still monitored what I took a look at. And even, say, with gaming, my dad didn't even let me play the first Fallout until I hit 14. I was almost 15 at the time. And even then, in that game, some of the humor went over my head because I didn't have the actual life experience to be like, oh, wait a second. That's a joke that they made that, a more well-adjusted adult or, somebody with a little bit more life experience would be like, oh, I recognize that. Again, it was mostly the more raunchy jokes that are out there. I've had to have online friends explain certain things to me every once in a while. It's like, 'cause it's like, I'm not seeing where this joke is at, And it's like, eventually I'll get it, but yeah, most soap opera elements will always go to like the most lowest common denominator when it comes to bedroom antics, and it's just like, it's not my cup of tea. I don't know how many times I have to say it, but it's not what motivates me to write. Which is why I find it refreshing when anybody goes to fade to black, because otherwise I'm gonna be like, okay, skip. Okay, are we back to the plot now? 200 pages later. Wow. It's a good thing I just took a look at this thing over in the bookstore or in the library, because for the most part, a lot of this stuff turns up in traditional publishing when it comes to certain kinds of wheelhouses, which is why I usually bypass those wheelhouses almost automatically. Because especially with the Kindle Vella tags, it'll tell me if it has soap opera elements, because it'll be like, oh, they're lovers, but they go from enemies to friends. It's like, that's a big soap opera element that's very popular with certain segments. So I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna go with that. When it says romance primary, or if it mentions romance at all, it usually means that will be a big cornerstone in that story. And it's just like, no. I think with the Vella, from now on, I'll look at it, okay, maybe put in romance subplot so people know that the romance isn't going to be the main draw, but you still want to include it. And heck, you know what? Maybe I'll even start looking for people tagging stuff with, like, courtly romance. Because courtly romance to me is, the guy basically courts the lady and doesn't do anything, completely outrageous, in terms of, oh, look, it's more erotica, that sort of thing. Like, it's hard to find what I deem clean romances, which is why I'll usually offer Mr. Delarosa's books below here, because the guy knows how to do clean romance. When he has subplots, for romances, but it's not the main draw, and everything else kind of just moves along with it. And in a way, that does remind me, in a very good way, of Babylon 5. Again, I'll always go back to Babylon 5 for a lot of things because it does have a lot of elements that click together that work for me, which is why I'm trying to mimic certain things of it within Uplift Protocol. So, how about you guys? How you doing today? I think I'll probably just merge these both together to make one big giant video. See you later.